Yes, movement is important. And as you could see from being here and attending convention so far, going hand in hand with seeds of hope, movement is very powerful. Even referenced in the butterfly effect, a single flap of a butterfly's wings could be felt across the world, just like a tidal wave. And so we empower and we try to inspire and we try to plant those seeds of hope into our young people to go out into the world and see the world and what they're a part of. And now I would like to let you hear from some of our pilgrims as they'll tell you their experiences and give you a few words and share with you those seeds and share with you those flowering plants that continue to water and continue to grow.
It was one of the first things that we did in Jerusalem. After dinner, we met outside the Holy Land Hotel and silently made our way through the old city, dodging carts and throngs of people. When we finally got to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there was no tour. We were simply instructed to wander the grounds and somehow managed to take it all in. I chose to pray in the chapel on top of Golgotha and the chapel of St. Helen, and then finally at the Edicule. It was in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre praying that I felt the Holy Spirit more than I've ever felt before. This was, I think, the most intense moment of my spiritual life, to ponder the enormity of the sacrifice and then miracle that took place here, to think that it was upon this dark hill that such cosmic events took place, events that would change the world forever. It was overwhelming to me. And then at St. Mark's Convent, I felt the presence of God as I had never done before. We met a nun there named Sister Justina. She told us many stories of the miracles she had witnessed, this being the place that the Last Supper and Pentecost took place. She showed us a miracle-working icon, which was painted by St. Luke. And then she sang for us the Our Father in Aramaic. But it was the way it was sung that I will never forget. It sent chills up my spine. She so passionately prayed those words. I recall these events because they centered on prayer. It was my prayer on the first day of our pilgrimage that God would open my eyes to what was around me and open my ears to Him. I chose to make my pilgrimage rooted in prayer, and that is what most affected me on the Hands in Healing Youth Pilgrimage to the Holy Lands. Before my pilgrimage, I was perhaps doubtful of certain things, but there's something special about being in the Holy Land. I found myself surrendering more and more to a living God who is constantly making Himself known to me. Rabbi Abraham Heschel once said that faith is an endless pilgrimage of the heart. I understand this quote now more than before, now that I've experienced true pilgrimage. You see, true pilgrimage follows you home. On a pilgrimage, you cannot help but completely surrender yourself in order that you may encounter God where He made Himself known. And so today I am trying to live my faith in reflection of my pilgrimage, what I saw and learned and how I felt. On this trip, I met some of my best friends. I tried new foods. I experienced once-in-a-lifetime things. Most importantly, I've grown in my faith. I'm a more spiritual, prayerful person. I pray for the peace of Jerusalem and for peace between Israel and Palestine. This is the place where God Himself chose to become incarnate, the land of prophets and patriarchs. This is an area that desperately needs peace. Damned if I know how to fix it, but we can all start by praying daily for the peace of Jerusalem. And if we should forget Jerusalem, let our right hand wither. Today I pray that the Diocese of Los Angeles will continue to support these pilgrimages, and that we as a diocese will continue to be hands in healing in the Middle East and throughout the world.
Good afternoon. I always believed myself to have a wide perspective. I've been raised in an open and accepting environment, and that is clearly translated into my life as a young adult. I love trying new things and experiencing new cultures, and in no way do I find myself to be naive or ignorant of the world around me. Traveling 7,583 miles across the globe in 13 hours changed the way I view the world and myself. It expanded my perspective to span across the globe, and Israel taught me just how small our world really is. Sitting in a Sunday service at St. Paul's, I heard one of my favorite hymns sung in Arabic, a thought that had never crossed my mind, that the hymns I sing every Sunday are sung in different languages in Episcopal churches around the world. And at the Basilica of the Annunciation, I realized that my Virgin Mary is admired by a Japanese teenager my age, but in a completely different view. I picture my Mary to be as beautiful as the women I saw in Israel, and flowing in blue robes with gold accents, olive skin, and long dark hair. The Japanese teenager imagines her Japanese, often in those same blue and gold robes, the same woman who gave birth to Jesus Christ, but in two very different spotlights. Although this pilgrimage only took me to one country, I felt as though with this trip I had been connected to Christians across the world. Because from St. James in South Pasadena to St. Paul's and out to Japan, that's how far our religion stretches. I am addicted to church. I love Advent, and I would be lying to you if I said the Holy Week wasn't my favorite 7 days of the liturgical calendar. And having a favorite set of liturgical days should be a testament to my addiction. And with all that being said, I can assure you there wasn't a church I didn't love while walking through Israel. Every icon, mosaic, and stained glass window was just as beautiful as the next. Starting with the Church of Transfiguration we visited on our first morning in Israel, to my favorite, the Holy Sepulchre in the Old City. The history flawlessly provided by the famous Iyad taught me so much about the land as I touched the star in the Church of the Nativity, where Jesus, my Jesus, was born. Walked where Mary had walked and stood where Joseph stood, connected me to my religion more than all my years at church combined. Each step I took and each bit of history Iyad told us solidified everything I had learned in Sunday school. And while I've always been a firm believer of what is spoken between church walls, growing up, religion to me was similar to the concept of Santa Claus. Some kids believed in it and some kids didn't, and I hadn't been presented with concrete evidence besides stories that said he existed, but I also hadn't been presented with anything telling me that everything I had been told didn't happen. Visiting Israel was me visiting the North Pole. I drank from the water from Jacob's well. I touched the rock that Jesus was crucified on top of. I sat in the cave that Jesus sat in for 40 days and 40 nights. And how many people can say they did that? How many people, let alone teenagers, are able to hear a story from the Bible and say, oh yeah, I stood in that spot. The tree Zacchaeus climbed to see Jesus speak to a crowd, I touched that tree. The sea where the fishermen were desperately searching for food and where they met Jesus and cast their nets on the other side of the boat and found hundreds upon hundreds of fish, I swam in that sea. My favorite event of our trip was about halfway through our pilgrimage, and we woke up at the most ungodly hour of 4:30 to climb on the bus and watch the most godly sunrise I have ever seen. Now, only having 18 years under my belt and the personality of a night owl, I haven't exactly seen my fair share of sunrises. But I think anyone sitting in this convention center who has sat in silence for 2 hours to watch that sunrise can agree it's the most beautiful sunrise in the entire world. It starts in absolute darkness to a subtle orange glow peeking from behind the mountains in front of you, and then a pink shade that covers the rocks all around you, and you simply wait. Surrounded by the most beautiful landscape and the slow crescendoing chirps of birds. I sat very patiently waiting for the sun to rise. It's quite the process, but it's amazing, breathtaking, and brilliant. And just in those final moments of the sun finally coming up from behind the mountains, A flock of birds flew across the skyline as if queuing in the sun, and it was pulled up from behind the mountains to brighten the entire sky. Never have I seen nature so in sync and God's art so present. The Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles allowed me to explore my spirituality and deepen my faith in one simple plane ticket. There are kids all over the world who will never get the chance that I got through our diocese. And I am so thankful that I could be part of a trip so fascinating and life-changing from beginning to end. Thank you.